The shipping people between themselves say if it was not for shipping, half the world would freeze and the other half would be hungry, would starve.
How many people are prepared to lower the standards of living for the environment?
We might be reaching to a point of no return, meaning that it's not only what we do, but how fast we do it.
Sorry. 1 year ago, I came to Davos and told you that our house is on fire. I said I wanted you to panic. I've been warned that telling people to panic about the climate crisis is a very dangerous thing to do. But don't worry, it's fine. Trust me, I've done this before, and I can assure you it doesn't lead to anything.
Ships generally use some of the heaviest, least refined fuel on the market.
The container vessels, tankers, and cruise ships that sail our seas are also giant polluters, and scientists say it's not just marine life that's being put at risk.
Good morning, Mr. Lim. My name's Margot Gibbs. I'm a journalist, and I was hoping to talk to you about your work with the IMO to limit global shipping emissions.
This is heavy fuel oil, the fuel that ships use for their operations. It is the dirtiest transport fuel ever imaginable. They do not pay any taxes for using this fuel. As a result, the impact on the emissions, the impact on climate change is through the roof. Using dirty fuel is not expensive.
Would you mind telling us a bit, like, how do you feel right now?
I don't think I will be able to describe it.
I can still smell it.
Yeah.
It's too.
Yeah. Can you give me 1 second? Maybe we can even actually open the window to air a bit. You can call it folks being in charge of the hen house. IMO is such an organization for shipping. It is under the full influence of a shipping industry, and historically speaking, it has a very poor track record when it comes to the environment.
Here's some positive news on the environment to start 2020. From the 1st of January, air pollution from ships will be drastically cut, thanks to a new rule from IMO, the UN body that makes the regulations for international shipping.
Black carbon is one of the smallest components of particulate matter, and it's particularly harmful because it's not only a climate pollutant, but it's also a health pollutant.
Το βαρύ μαζούτ είναι το κατάλοιπο που μένει από την παραγωγή βενζίνης και ντίζελ. Το απόβλητο αυτό ήταν άχρηστο μέχρι η πετρελαϊκή βιομηχανία να βρει πελάτη, την ναυτιλία. Το μαζούτ εκπέμπει διοξίδιο του άνθρακα και άλλους ρήπους υπεύθυνους για τις παθήσεις του αναπνευστικού και την κλιματική αλλαγή. Το 2020 τα πλοία έβαλαν ένα νέο καύσιμο πολύ χαμηλό σε περιεκτικότητα θείου. Και αυτό όμως είναι πολύ πιο βρώμικο από το ντίζελ των αυτοκινήτων, ενώ απελευθερώνει ακόμα περισσότερο μαύρο άνθρακα.
Shipping industry can switch to cleaner diesel overnight. They do not need to change the vessels, they do not need to change anything. They just need to bunker cleaner fuel.
It's got 7 minutes to be on time.
Okay, now we can hear you.
I think we can hear everybody now.
We're just waiting for Julian.
Hey!
Hi. So can everybody hear us?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Hi, Nicholas. I will start with bad news and the problems we're having, especially with the field work, and then maybe we can try to solve them a little bit as well. So the Lisbon part of the story is a bit in jeopardy because the ports are not accepting any ships. I mean, we have on the schedule all these ships that are going to arrive at the Lisbon, this brand new cruise terminal, which was, as you know, was the beginning of the story. And now they're not coming. So, and nobody knows when they will come.
O terminal poderá ter capacidade para 1,8 milhões.
Ah, bom. Não, é que eu fiquei... Eu sinceramente tinha ficado um bocadinho apreensiva, porque hoje já temos meio milhão, não é? Já estava a achar que íamos esgotar rapidamente, mas assim, 1 milhão e 800 mil já é razoável.
Vivo muito próximo do terminal e comecei-me a sentir doente e fiz uma associação com o tráfego dos navios, que estão em constante funcionamento, têm as chaminés o tempo todo a funcionar e sentia ardor nos olhos, ardor na garganta e na respiração. Tive que ser acompanhada por um pneumologista. Os navios que passam no Tejo têm, para muitos, uma visão romântica, mas que têm um impacto muito grande na nossa saúde.
No caso dos navios de cruzeiro, quando chegam a Porto, são verdadeiras cidades flutuantes que têm de estar a funcionar enquanto aqui estão paradas. E, portanto, eu tenho que queimar fuel óleo, que apesar de ter menos enxofre quando está em Porto, acaba por ter um impacto muito grande em termos de partículas ultrafinas, que são aquelas que mais facilmente penetram no nosso organismo. Quando nós temos um terminal tão perto de zonas residenciais, obviamente essa é uma fonte de preocupação enorme.
La presenza di tante navi che 24 ore su 24 hanno i motori accesi significa imporre a Civitavecchia un supplizio che è appunto giornaliero, perché l'impatto ambientale rispetto alla combustione dei carburanti delle navi, grandissime navi, significa purtroppo fare i conti con un ambiente devastato e con una salute pubblica che è assolutamente messa in discussione e che purtroppo molto spesso produce tanti morti. Dietro questi numeri, dietro questi dati, in una città come Civitavecchia ci sono gli sguardi, i volti, i ricordi di tanti cari che non ci sono più. L'atteggiamento della città è quello di una popolazione impaurita che fa i conti ogni mese, ogni giorno con decine di ammalati per patologie oncologiche e respiratorie. I comitati locali hanno interagito molto con i ragazzi di Fridays for Future. Siamo riusciti ad interagire anche con ragazzi molto giovani di altre città.
In modo da coprire integralmente naso e bocca. La violazione di tale obbligo porta all'intervento delle forze dell'ordine con l'interruzione del servizio.
I'm an old researcher and I'm retired and I work as an epidemiologist and I was oncologist and technician in terms of public health research, and my hope is to understand the cause of the disease. We can see that the mortality is very different and is stable. That is a very strange and very also impressive situation. The mortality, for instance, in this area, in this area, in this area, or around the harbor here, so are stable. So we can see each year for all the population in the mean, the mortality is higher than expected.
When you show this data to local authorities, what is the reaction?
They don't want to see. They don't want to see. I think that so the authority are are strongly connected with the business, with the harbor business that is very rich also.
Assolutamente unica. We are the masters of the sea.
One thing that is more difficult for us is to share our city with the port. The value that we have are not enough to balance this risk, because it's about the air that we breathe, and it's about damage that probably we will discover in the future.
It's a long work because it's also difficult to understand whose the fault is. It's like, obviously, the ships, and it's a national problem, but we are the local, and so it's not so easy to fight it.
That was like, we are going to sign this document just if you cut the point of the port. And we were like, how? Like, seriously, at that point? And we had to do it, because it was the only way to let them sign the document. It happens 1 year ago, and we have to say that anything changed from the sign of this document.
This point is impossible, like they protect them. And also like the taxes on the emissions and the sulfur emission and so on. They say they do it, but they don't control it. So if you don't control it, how can you tax them? How can you make them pay?
We never get the information with who we have to talk. We lost the line because it's just going nowhere.
La gente arriva che siamo già tutti seduti. No, vabbè, è importante. No. Ma se guardi i miei
I was organizing alone. I was thinking to find 200 people in the square the day after, and we were in 50,000. And when I discovered the night before that the people were increasing as number, people start to give me some tips, like you should put in the front of the people line something with a message.
Climate justice!
Today, the port is a very important element of the city of Genoa. These damages to the health and environment
power. Tell me, can you feel it? Tell me, can you feel it?
We cannot treat shipping favorably as a favorite child. They also need to make their effort. The European Union has today 27 member states. We call it 28 member states, and the last member state is actually shipping. The sector is so big, its emissions are so massive that you can treat it as a country. You cannot have zero carbon continent by forgetting one member state. Otherwise, the efforts made elsewhere will be undone.
Οι ίδιες τοξίνες που προκαλούν προβλήματα υγείας στα λιμάνια προκαλούν και την υπερθέρμανση του πλανήτη. Η κλιματική αλλαγή, όπως και η ναυτιλία, είναι παγκόσμια υπόθεση. Αν η ναυτιλία ήταν χώρα, θα ήταν έκτη στον κόσμο στις εκπομπές αερίων του θερμοκηπίου, απελευθερώνοντας κυρίως διοξίδιο του άνθρακα, και οι εκπομπές της αυξάνονται. Αυτές οι εκπομπές προέρχονται από 50.000 πλοία με κύριους αυτουργούς τα κρουαζιερόπλοια και τα φορτηγά. Πέρα από τις επιπτώσεις για τους κατοίκους των λιμανιών, οι εκπομπές της ναυτιλίας πλήττουν επίσης το περιβάλλον σε περιοχές όπως η Αρκτική.
My name is I'm 19 years old. I moved to Svalbard because of my parents. They got jobs here, so they thought that it would be a great idea to move me to the North Pole. So that's why I'm here. I've been living here for 13 years, right? And my first birthday I celebrated in Svalbard was September 19th, 2007. And there was snowing outside in the window, and I saw it was a lot of snow. And now my birthday is just no snow whatsoever, and that's a very obvious change for me. I enjoyed summer. It was 20 degrees outside, and people were wearing sundresses and sandals and went to the beach and were bathing in the water. That's never happened before. It's my first time bathing in summer in Svalbard. It's kind of shame, guilty pleasure maybe. Then you realize that this is too warm. This should not be like this. I walk from the road there and pass by and to the school. It's my shortcut.
What happened was that it was a great storm. The snow released. It came a big avalanche that took many of the houses here.
The outcome of the avalanche was that we lost 2 lives. One of them were my music teacher, and the other one was a 2-year-old girl. People and the town become really quiet, and we could feel the sadness in the air.
Longyearbyen is in a valley where we have mountains on both of the sides of the town. And when the permafrost melts, the ground releases and it comes like earth avalanches. I have noticed that the polar bears they're coming into the city. They're probably looking for food because the ice is melting, and the hunting area for the polar bears are the ice where the seal lives.
What is the goal of the organization? What do you hope to achieve?
make people see and understand that climate change is really happening and that needs to be solved fast.
For the last 2-3 years, I've been involved in interdisciplinary research, so working with natural scientists on issues relating to Arctic changes, Arctic climatic changes, changes in sea ice, and changes in societies. What we're seeing in the Arctic is that environmental changes are happening about twice as quickly as in other parts of the world. And that's a process that we've called Arctic amplification. Black carbon is something that we call a short-lived climate forcer. And it's part of a larger group of compounds that have a short-lived climatic effect in some way. When spreading soot on the snow, it darkens, and so the radiation from the sun is going to be absorbed. And when that radiation is absorbed, it gets transformed into heat. The soot emissions from shipping aren't just relevant in the Arctic. There are some soot particles that get deposited locally, within a couple of kilometers.
Hey guys.
And there are other soot particles that get mixed with the atmosphere and transported over longer distances, and they can also have an effect.
How are you?
Avoiding black carbon emissions is because it only lasts in the atmosphere for a couple of days or weeks. So if you can avoid emitting more of it, you can have an immediate reduction in the amount of warming that's happening today. So it can buy you additional time and prevent climate tipping points from occurring.
%90 of world trade is carried by shipping.
Transportation by sea is the most efficient way of transportation.
About 20% of all goods which are carried by Greek ships, which, for a small midget country like ours is quite a big achievement.
Shipping carries 90% of the global freight, and it accounts less than 3% of carbon dioxide emissions.
I need to be focused on building the interviews. And also to discuss that we don't want to get too much technical. We want to make something that is broad, clear, and simple.
Pretty close. We should be there in 5 or 10 minutes.
Okay.
Τι κάνετε?
Αεροκαπολιτά δεν δίνουμε, έτσι, να
Καλά είστε?
Καλά, εσείς.
Hi.
Καλημέρα, hi.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Mikael from
Hi.
Portugal.
Nice to meet you.
And João, also from Portugal.
Hi. Today we own about 90 ships, which are of various types, bulk carriers, refrigerated ships, tankers. In addition to that, we are strongly involved in the hospitality business. We are the major shareholders in Aegean Airlines, which is Greece's national carrier. But our main business and our main interest is shipping. We are like the taxi drivers of the world.
You have to consider ship owners as the lorry drivers.
The ship owners don't build ships, don't manufacture engines, do not produce bunkers themselves, and they don't actually trade them vessels themselves. They charter it out.
Do you ask the lorry driver to improve his engine, to modify, or to have a small refinery on board in order to improve the fuel?
The most strongest one in the market are the Chinese now.
No.
No?
No. No.
Maybe the cheapest one.
But not the best.
The best are the Japanese.
The best are the Japanese, then the Koreans, then the Chinese. Some
shipping sectors like our own, we are dealing with relatively low technology vessels. And in the low technology vessels, these must be built in series. It's not easy for a small owner to make changes which will improve the emissions reduction technology for the vessels.
Now you have discovered black carbon and you think black carbon is going to save the world. No. The real problem, the scientists will tell you, is the CO2. This is causing the global warming. The other greenhouse gases are minor byproducts in minor quantities. The financial burden of using gas oil instead of fuel oil, yes, it would be better, but it's not value for money.
Once we see that black carbon is damaging overall, maybe the solution is to say we have to put appropriate filters in the stack to keep the black carbon from getting into the atmosphere.
We introduced the plan to discharge here, because from here onwards you don't need special ships. You can do almost ordinary ships. 2 reloading facilities, ship to ship, and they continue.
More or less in days of journey, how many days?
15 instead of 35. To go immediately to diesel by changing huge parts of the engine, pumps, valves, the systems, might be possible. But instead of doing that, they opted for the high sulfur and low sulfur solution. This, in my opinion, was a mistake, a grave mistake. An industry that is suffering for a terrible market. To say now change again your engines to burn only diesel. You'll see everybody in bankruptcy. The useful life of the ships is 20 years. Within these 20 years, the last ship will be scrapped with the old technology, and all the technology will be renewed. You must have a long-term planning. These things cannot be done from today to tomorrow.
This bunker fuel is the last part that comes out of a refinery process. That last part, either you throw away somewhere, or you give it to ships to burn, or you can make it into tar for roads.
If we go back historically, I'm talking about the 50s and 60s, we were actually burning distillate fuels, or almost distillate fuels. And as the oil industry developed heavier and heavier fuels, it was realized that the marine engines could burn these heavier fuels. These fuels were introduced into our business.
Because?
Because of the cost.
At that time, there was no climate change concerns and no so intense concerns on human health.
Yes, that's correct.
Overnight measure from day 1 to day 2 is reduction of speed. Reduction of speed reduces by half all emissions, CO2, particulates. Why? Because you reduce by half the total fuel that you are consuming.
If the world trade expands, we need more ships, we need more bankers. We need, at the end of the day, ships will produce more CO2.
The shipping industry is not well understood by the EU.
Shipping is an international business, therefore it has to be regulated internationally. There is a quotation by Mrs. von der Leyen, very recent one, when the reconstruction package was debated, and the discussion was where will this money come from? And this lady shamelessly has said, well, you know, we will tax people and we will tax also shipping. Okay, so here you are.
People tend not to appreciate what shipping does to their own standards of living. The reason that we have a very cheap Japanese or Taiwanese or Korean TV set or refrigerator in our house is part also of the cost efficiency of shipping. The transportation cost is minimal, but this is not understood by the public. They take it for granted.
Every country is going to IMO protecting also their industries and their interest. It's natural and it's a fact.
There is opinion, including some scientists, stating that the Greek delegation of the IMO is mostly trying to block new regulations for the environment and pushing for delays. Do you think there is such a case?
Do you know of any industry that likes to speed up and promote new regulations? I think there is hardly no such business.
The major environmental organizations, and there are 10 in there, when they go into IMO, they have more people in that delegation than Greece, all the shipping nations,
but they cannot
Panama
vote.
and all that.
They cannot vote.
But if you have like 80 people in your delegation in IMO, and Greece has only 7, you can imagine how much influence you're going to have.
IMO listens more to NGOs than to the shipping companies. So when you produce a regulation, for example, it's produced mostly for the environmental NGOs than for the implementation by the shipping companies.
The Greek government does what the Union of Ship Owners tells them to do.
Are you? We took over your office, I'm sorry. No problem.
And in 99% of the cases, this is a good thing. Do you believe that there is one politician in the world who really cares about the environment?
It's important to have an interview with you because you're the minister in Greece responsible for shipping and...
The most important.
Yes. The what?
The most important minister worldwide.
If it's the biggest...
In terms of shipping.
Yes, I mean,
at least in terms of EU.
At the same time, you have such a big issue as climate change. So
yes, but we are fully committed. They are taking measures, they are introducing policy without really proof. I mean, okay, we are committed to reduce carbon dioxide emission. Okay, this is an absolute goal for everybody that is involved in this business. But do we have real proof if such a policy will have a positive effect in terms of carbon dioxide emission? This is a question mark.
We went through the official list of advisors that represent Greece at the IMO, and specifically at this environmental committee of the IMO. Almost everybody who is on the list of advisors is has strong ties with the industry. You could have environmental movements, you could have scientists.
I mean, we're talking about shipping now.
Yes,
so
yes.
I didn't understand the question.
The question is that this is a big public debate about climate change.
I mean, this delegation is focused on shipping matters.
It's the environmental committee.
It's the environmental committee, but specialized for shipping matters. So what is the question actually? IMO is the global regulator for maritime affairs and policies. So, I mean, it is obvious that the delegation must be from the industry. IMO, it's like the United Nations in terms of shipping.
Do you agree that the European Union can regulate on shipping?
IMO is the only global regulator of international shipping.
But are you going or are you not going too slow for the urgency that is there?
IMO is moving very fast.
How Greek is the Greek shipping industry?
100%.
We want to show you something.
This is an interview we did with Mr. Laskaridis, Mr. Panos Laskaridis.
No.
This you need to understand well. People who are in shipping don't need the Greek government, don't need the ministry, don't need the IMO, don't need the prime minister. They can shit on the prime minister. They have no need of the prime minister. Why? Because shipping has nothing to do with Greece. There is nothing that a ship owner will gain from Greece. No cargoes to Greece, no contracts from Greece, nothing in Greece. Only his office is here. 80% has foreign flags, but they don't care about the Greek flag.
Yeah. Do you have any comment on this?
The Greek government has formed a stable institutional framework for the Greek shipping industry in order to have such a huge progress over the past decade.
Εμείς δεν αρνηθήκαμε να απαντήσουμε σε καμία από τις ερωτήσεις που σας θέλουμε. Όποια ερώτηση θέλετε.
What I found out is a number, that is how many taxes do shipping companies on average pay. The tax rate of the shipping industry seems to be around 7% of their profits. And then there are certain sectors where this is particularly low. The cruise sector, on average, their tax rate is 0% basically.
Πολλές χώρες χρησιμοποιούν τον φόρο τονάζ. Πώς λειτουργεί? Ας πάρουμε το παράδειγμα του κουρασγερόπλοιου MSC Preziosa. Ανήκει σε βρετανική εταιρεία, πλέει με σημαία Παναμά και οι διαχειριστές του είναι στη Βρετανία και την Ιταλία. Το Preziosa δεν πληρώνει φόρο επί των κερδών του. Καταβάλει ένα σταθερό ποσό βάσει του όγκου του. Το 2018 και το 2019 είχε κέρδη 44 εκατομμύρια ευρώ. Ο φόρος του 36.000, 0,08%. Συγκριτικά, οι φορολογούμενοι και οι εταιρείες στην Ελλάδα θα πλήρωναν εκατομμύρια.
If you pay less taxes than a normal company would pay, you could consider that a tax subsidy. If you talk about how can we reduce the environmental impact of shipping, this is where you should also look at. So you should, for a start, tax shipping fuels. The question, of course, is if you would double the price of shipping, let's say, who would actually pay for that? The profits of shipping companies, that could be lower, but I think actually the largest part would probably simply be the goods that people consume would be a little bit more expensive. Consumers wouldn't really notice it that much, but it would help really to make shipping cleaner.
Are these younger generations, like the Generation Z, for example, that is like protesting now, are they naive or do they know something that the old generations don't know about climate?
No, they're not naive. They're just taking science seriously. And I think it's pretty embarrassing for my generation that we have ignored the ever louder warnings of science for so long. My message to the young generation would be, please keep pushing, keep pressing, keep going on the street if nothing happens. And most importantly, talk. Talk to your relatives, talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, talk to your teachers, talk to your whomever. because a lot of people still have not grasped how serious the situation really is.
Rilevazione dei dati sul consumo di combustibile delle navi, voto sulla proposta della Commissione, approvato. Rilevazione dei dati sul consumo di combustibile delle navi, voto sul rinvio alla Commissione competente, approvato.
Up to now, the shipping sector did not have to do anything on climate, and now European Parliament has, with a very broad majority of all political groups that are part of governments in the member states somewhere have agreed to say ships will have to pay for their emissions. Thus, the most dirty ship, the most polluting ships, the most inefficient ships will be pushed off the market.
Why don't you want the ETS to start happening with these amendments and right away?
Because that's bad legislation. You do not include a whole sector, a whole industry in the ETS system without a proper impact assessment.
Some people, especially the younger generation, say that, look, you're in the parliament, this is just speak to delay. You know, we don't have any more time.
Yeah, I understand that perception, but that is only perception. The fact is that if we are going to make profound change of the climate situation, we need to have all our industries to work with us forward to the goals and to the big ambitions. And therefore, we need an impact assessment that shows us exactly what do we need to do better.
Now is the time to be brave. Maersk has taken the lead and decided to become carbon neutral by 2050.
The 700 ships of Maersk emit more CO2 than the 5,000 Greek ships. Why? Because they are very big and because they sail at huge speeds and therefore consume huge quantities of fuel.
The fourth IMO greenhouse gas study showed that between 2012 and 2018, greenhouse gas emissions from the global shipping sector have increased about 10% over that period. And emissions of what we call short-lived climate pollutants like black carbon and methane have increased even more. Black carbon emissions between 2012 and 2018 increased 12%.
A major part of IMO's role is to ensure that shipping continues to make its contribution to the global economy without upsetting nature's delicate balance.
Το 2018 ο IMO ανακοίνωσε την πράσινη στρατηγική του. Μείωση της έντασης άνθρακα κατά 40% και όλων των εκπομπών κατά 50% ως το 2050. Το 2020 αθέτησε τη στρατηγική του, αρκούμενος σε μη δεσμευτικές και βραχυπρόθεσμες λύσεις. Οι επιστήμονες υπολόγισαν πως αν η ναυτιλία δεν κάνει τίποτα, οι εκπομπές της θα αυξηθούν αυτή τη δεκαετία κατά 15%. Με το σχέδιο του IMO η αύξηση θα είναι 14%, μόλις 1% καλύτερα από το να μην γίνει τίποτα. Η ναυτιλία πρέπει να μειώσει τους ρήπους της, αλλά ο IMO δεν της το ζητάει. Εν τέλει, ο νέος πράσινος IMO μοιάζει υπερβολικά με τον παλιό.
After the 2008 financial crisis, a phenomenon called slow steaming took over. You slow down even a little bit, you dramatically reduce fuel consumption. And based on our research, the speed reductions that we've seen after the financial crisis are still in place today. So there hasn't been a big rebound in speeds. If you're not actually reducing the real operational carbon intensity of shipping at a faster rate than the demand is growing, then emissions continue to go up.
Today, the industry is further than ever from reducing its emissions.
Many people think that 2008 was actually the peak, and where we are today is below where we were in 2008. And if you match that up against the growth in trade, it's actually quite impressive. And it's impressive that any emissions haven't grown at a faster rate. What we're starting to see now is a separation where trade can grow faster than the emissions do, which means we're starting to gain on this.
There have been concerns toward these new blends of fuel that have been introduced by the oil industry. Some NGOs point that there is some risk that these blends actually increase the emissions of black carbon. What's the MSC's perspective on that?
So first of all, it's important to make the distinction that black carbon is not at all like CO2 emissions. It's a particulate. And there has been some debate between different sides of viewing these new blended fuels as to what the black carbon potential might be there. I don't know exactly what the science says, but I know it is quite unresolved because there's a strong difference of opinion.
Why not having more ambitious goals than what the shipping sector has today?
So an aspirational goal, and I don't know what you mean by the shipping sector because IMO is not the shipping sector and they've set the levels of ambition. Governments set those levels of ambition, not the shipping industry.
With the industry. The IMO is putting everybody around the table, governments and the industry.
That's the same as any deliberative body that has observers that are advisors, expert advisors. It's governments that are the only ones that get to make the decisions at the IMO. It's their body. It's a body of governments. It's a UN agency.
In the past, when there were calls like ours, like citizens, that we need to regulate shipping, member states would always come forward, and shipping industry would come forward and say, there is an international regulator, IMO, they should be in charge of it because shipping is global, only global regulator can regulate it. Which we came to realize that was just an excuse for doing nothing.
Do you think the institution and the people that make up the institution have recognised properly the urgency of what is required?
I think there is recognition of the urgency, but there's also continued fear and misunderstanding about the consequences of action. There's a very understandable tension between the potential risks for an individual country's economy and the global commons challenge of reducing emissions. In practice, it doesn't matter whether the emissions stay constant or they grow by 250%. Neither is compatible with achieving a 50% reduction by 2030 and a zero emission objective by 2050. They're dramatically at odds with that. The strategy is complicated. It's got different sentences. And one of the sentences is that we should improve our carbon intensity by 40%. I think that is going to be achieved regardless of the energy efficiency policy because it's on the business as usual projection. It's what we expect to happen anyway without further policy. But there are other sentences in the initial strategy, such as CO2 reductions on a pathway consistent with the Paris Agreement temperature goals. That cannot be achieved because on the energy efficiency regulations that the IMO has implemented in, they are too weak to ensure that we do not have rises in GHG emissions from shipping over the coming decade. And if we have increasing emissions this decade, that's diametrically opposed to what we need to happen in line with the IPCC's work on 1.5, which is a substantial, approximately 50% reduction by 2030 on 2010 emissions. Because it takes so long to change the shipping industry, we might be in a situation where shipping suddenly finds it's 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and then it's 50%, and then it's even the dominant source of global greenhouse gas emissions. So the two things that shipping needs to do are first maximise energy efficiency and crystallise a lot of opportunities that it has to make further efficiency improvements. And then the second thing is to substitute its current fossil fuels with an alternative, and in our research we think that alternative is most likely to be a hydrogen-derived fuel. So not necessarily hydrogen, but something which is made synthetically, and a new set of ships built or the existing ones retrofitted. The pressure and the change has to come from elsewhere than the IMO for the next 5 years, because we are locked in at the IMO at the moment to a very low ambition energy efficiency improvement this decade.
2020 is on track to be one of the 3 warmest years on record globally, even with the cooling effect of this year's La Niña. The past decade was the hottest in human history. Ocean heat is at record levels. In the Arctic, 2020 has seen exceptional warms, with temperatures more than 3 degrees Celsius above average.
Good morning, Mr. Lim. Hi, Mr. Lim. My name's Margot Gibbs. I'm a journalist, and I was hoping to talk to you about your work with the IMO to limit global shipping emissions.
Greenland ice has continued its long-term decline, losing an average of 278 gigatons a year.
We tried to organise an interview.
Permafrost is melting, and so releasing methane, a potent greenhouse gas.
In the next decade, the IMO is doing almost nothing to limit shipping emissions.
Yes, I have to leave now.
Is it possible that we can talk to you about this, Mr. Lim?
Beyond announcements, all must pass a credibility test. Let me take one example, the example of shipping.
I'm working with Expresso and SIC, and we tried to get an interview.
SIC, what does that stand for?
It's the Portuguese broadcaster. Portuguese.
We need to see enforceable regulatory and fiscal steps so that the shipping industry can deliver its commitments. Otherwise, the net zero ship will have sailed.
I understand your point.
Yeah.
I understand point. Now that everybody much aware of the climate change issues, we're ambitious. Sometimes, for time being, IMO, we have 174 member states. In a way, we have to reach a certain agreement.
How
so that's why I cannot say more. But you have to know all nowadays, thanks to the climate change Paris Agreement, everybody knows about it. Everyone knows about that. But there are some different views in terms of how to handle. But now, much better.
Any plan or policy of yours that doesn't include radical emission cuts at the source starting today is completely insufficient for meeting the 1.5 or well below 2 degree commitments of the Paris Agreement.
Do you think the work of young climate change activists has changed how the IMO was working? Okay.
You say children shouldn't worry. You say, just leave this to us. We will fix this. We promise we won't let you down. Don't be so pessimistic.
Thank you, Mr. Lim.
I appreciate your airport. I like it. But I cannot disclose all in my heart. I really appreciate that.
Great.
Maybe you can send a message to my office.
I will. I will. Thank you, Mr. Lim.
Obrigado.
Obrigado.
And then, nothing. Silence. Or something worse than silence. Empty words and promises which give the impression that sufficient action is being taken.
Hi there, it's Margot Gibbs here from Finance Uncovered. I was just ringing to say, yes, we were speaking with Mr. Lim earlier this morning and he suggested that we could have an interview, maybe if we got in contact with his chief of staff.